All right, welcome everybody to this second researcher meet that we hosted for the Animal Behavior MOOC. It's great to see that we've got a full room of students participating in the meet. And our guest researcher this week is Professor Marie Herberstein from Macquarie University. I'm very worried that Marie has just disappeared again.
Yes. She's frozen again.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay. Hopefully she will be able to. Okay, we're going to hope that Marie can rejoin the hangout in a moment. I wonder whether maybe we could just go around the room, starting with you, is it Angela? And people could maybe just tell us where they are from, where they're beaming in from, and where their interest in animal behavior comes from and why they joined this course.
Okay. So I'm originally from Belgium, but I'm currently living in South Africa. And I started doing marketing here, but I'm now involved in a nature guide training course as a team member. So I did that last year because in Belgium you don't really have a lot of wildlife, so hence the interest.
I'm back.
Wonderful. The students are just introducing themselves, Marie, so you can get a sense of where everybody's from. So Angela was just explaining that she was originally from Belgium, now living in South Africa. What about you, Bella?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am from India. I have done my master's in marine biology, but I plan to do another one in studying animal behavior, to be specific. And I'm currently staying at home. I do 3 projects in different national parks, and I am preparing to apply for schools now.
Great.
Was I audible? Okay.
Over to you, Millie.
Okay. Hi, I'm Millie Colby from the University of Melbourne, and I'm the teaching assistant for the Animal Behaviour MOOC on Coursera. So, hi, everybody. Yeah, I just finished my master's majoring in zoology. I studied black swan behavioural ecology with Raoul.
Nitash?
I can't hear her.
Yeah, I can't hear it.
Let me just check your volume. Here we go. Try again. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, I'm Nitash from India. I'm pursuing my master's in biology in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology Lab from ICER. So currently I'm working with the honeybees at Hema Somanathan's lab.
Perfect. Natalie?
Oh, I'm here.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm from Russia. I'm a high school student, and I'm just interested in science. And when I looked out about this course a month ago, I just fell in love with it.
Great, thank you. What about you, Stefano?
Yes, hello everyone.
Sorry, Stefano, could you just speak up a little bit? You're in the speaker.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Stefano.
Yes, I'm from Jamaica, and I am pursuing my bachelor's degree in environmental studies at the Knox Community College. and I have a passion for animals and really love studying the environment and practically new to this MOOC.
Terrific, thank you. And what about you, Susanna?
Well, I'm from Spain and I'm biologist, and I'm trying to finish a master in tropical ecology and conservation biology from Australia in James Cook University in Townsville. And I really would like to be working in something related with the animal behavior because it had been my passion. So this is the reason why I'm doing this course.
Wonderful. This was the moment where I was going to turn to Marie to introduce her. So while we wait for her to come back on again, I'm just wondering whether people might want to share a bit about what they are enjoying about the course, whether they have any other feedback about aspects of the course that they're finding difficult or challenging or not so enjoyable.
Anyone can start?
Sure.
Oh, was that a yes?
Yes.
Over to you, Bella. You've got the floor.
Okay. All right. So I really love this course. This is the second time I'm doing this course. Last time I was in jungle, I had limited connectivity, so I didn't participate in discussions much. This time I'm enjoying that aspect of this course very much. I think Amelia would be aware of that. I asked a lot of questions, some silly and some perhaps important.
That's okay.
Discussions is my favorite part of this course, obviously besides the videos. And that's it?
Perfect.
Yeah, in my case, it's also the second time that I'm doing this course because I didn't have the opportunity to finish it the first time, and I really enjoy it. And then you can discover what the other people are doing because in my case, I wasn't sure that you can work doing this stuff. It means, so yeah, for people who really want to dedicate their life to be doing this, it's very useful, this course.
What's very exciting for us is to have such a diverse group of students participating in the course. Oh yes.
Yay.
Without further ado,
I checked my machine. I think it works now.
Okay. Now, so we just had the students introduce themselves. Marie, I wonder whether you could tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to be interested in animal behavior, and what sort of research topics you're interested in at the moment.
Okay. So I'm originally from Austria, and I did my PhD in Austria. And I suppose what started me with animal behavior was a project we had to do as an undergraduate, where I had to choose between a spider project or a project on slaters. And I chose a spider project, and then ever since I've been working with spiders. And I always think about what would have happened if I've chosen the slaters, whether I would have then embarked on a lifelong journey on slater biology. But I don't know why particularly behavior rather than anything else. I really enjoy observing. I'm very, very patient, except with technology, obviously. And I just like sitting there and watching. It makes me it fascinates me. I become very calm about it. And I have lots of questions about what the animals are doing, and I enjoy testing these questions or trying to test them. So what was the second part of the question, Raoul?
I guess about what the sort of topics are that you're currently investigating, what sort of animals.
Okay. Okay. So I have two broad areas of interest. One has to do with color and signaling with color, and a lot about how spiders can use color. And the other one is more about mating behavior and aspects of the mating behavior, female perspectives, male perspective. How do males get as much sperm across as possible? How are females trying to control some of that? And with spiders, of course, you have sexual cannibalism that always comes in there. So these are my broad areas: colors and signals and mating behavior.
Okay, so these are a lot of the themes that we've been covering over the last 2 weeks of the course: communication, and this week we've been looking at sexual selection. So what I want to do is open it up to questions from the students. I'm reluctant to dominate the conversation here. So if anybody has a question they want to ask, please go ahead right now.
Can I ask a question? So why have you chosen this course, this animal behavior course?
In my case, because I love it. I really love it. Yeah. And I did yeah.
No, go.
No. Don't worry.
I'll go. Okay, sorry. Is anyone answering this? Okay. All right. Well, watching them is it's fascinating. Animal behavior. Watching them is, like Marie said, it's very peaceful, and obviously get a lot of questions. And on this platform, I get this opportunity to ask those questions, and I get those answers in some time or instantly. And plus, I plan to do my further studies in the same field. So yes, definitely, I had to join this course.
What about the other guy?
I think in my case, it's I always thought when looking at animals doing any kind of behavior, I never really thought of question what they're actually doing until you actually sit down and observe them, like longer than you usually do for like 10 minutes before you usually kill a spider that comes into your house, so I never really thought of actually doing that until
bad luck. Don't do it. So what sort of animals are you observing?
In my case, I'm doing zebras.
Zebras, okay.
Yeah, and there's a hawk living in my garden. So starting to observe that. So that's my case.
Okay.
Okay. Basically, everyone, I joined this course because it has somewhat a lot to do with some of the courses I've done in my program, in the environmental studies program. I've already finished my associate degree, and I've done stuff like ecology and life sciences. But I think the most interesting part for me is that as a child, I've actually been doing a lot of these researches, but it was more for fun. It was actually until I got more mature and I realized, and I said, hey, I've been studying animals like the guys on National Geographic or Animal Planet. I've been catching lizards and tagging them with markers to identify them, taking lizard eggs and actually seeing if I could see them hatch, stuff like that. And I didn't know that I was actually doing a research about that until now. So I'm actually learning a lot more about it now, and some of the topics that I'm doing in this MOOC actually makes it more, it explains it more, some of the things that I see.
Okay, so you're putting it more into a theoretical context, and it's helping you to interpret it.
Yeah.
So did most of you have some sort of pivotal observation event where you then went, okay, I really need to get behind this and study it formally?
Yeah, I recently saw a pair of red-vented bulbuls. I'm from India, ma'am. I recently, in my lawn, I saw a pair of red-vented bulbuls take over the nest of house sparrows. And I wasn't sure why that happened. And after 2 days after that, I saw a squirrel climbing up the same tree and that red-vented bulbul pecking at it. So I would really like to observe that more. I'm not sure if the squirrel is trying to take away its egg or it's an occupied nest. I've not seen the fledglings yet, but I'm, I'm waiting for what's about to happen.
Okay, okay. So you're doing it right now. You're watching behavior as it happens.
Yes, I like to watch birds. They
Okay.
fascinate me. So wherever I go, even I'm driving or I'm swimming, I watch them. I see what they're doing.
Okay. So and this course then that this MOOCs that Raoul is running, is it giving you the background that you need to sort of interpret the behavior, or the ideas of how you could test whether behavior has one function or another?
Yes, definitely. I get to ask questions. I put my observations in the discussion forums and I get those answers.
Okay. What about some of the other guys? See, they're very silent. Millie, for example, is very silent.
Oh, I was just letting the students answer everything else because I'm the teaching assistant on the course. But yeah, I've been studying behavioural ecology of black swans. Yeah, with Raoul, I just finished my master's, so I was actually looking at their bill coloration and the type of signals that the red and white colour of their bill indicate. So yeah, and just looking at dominance displays and the role of bill coloration in those behaviours, which was really interesting. But I talked about that a lot in the first research meet video, so I don't want to bore everyone by going through it all again.
Okay.
So if I turn back to you, Marie,
Yeah.
you know, you're talking about the sort of things that make you passionate about animal behavior, what gets you fired up, and how you entered a career in animal behavior. Now you're a successful researcher in animal behavior, but with that comes more administrative responsibility. You're now the head of a department. How do you manage to keep connected with the?
I think she's not hearing you.
We've lost.
Yeah.
I think we have.
We lost her again. I think she doesn't want to talk.
That's right. Every time we ask a question, she disappears from the screen.
She disappears.
So, you're studying zebras for your field notes. And what were some of the other students studying? Susanna, what are you doing a field notes assignment?
For my assignment, I'm trying to finish to do my scientific paper for my thesis, like a little thesis in the master, but it was about insects. But my interest is on birds, so.
Are you doing either of the assignments in the MOOC, the field notes, or the other article?
No, I'm so sorry.
No, that's fine. If you were to study an animal, what would it be in your local environment?
Here.
Yeah.
Yeah, in this case, I'm doing like trying to help some people that are investigating the vultures, black vultures, that they're now going to Africa. So we're studying the different movements and the different behaviors that they have here and there, and we have been studying the chickens.
Is that the no, wait. Yeah, I think I actually saw them last year.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
But I don't know if I'm answering the question.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of, well, one of the great things about this MOOC is that there's people from all over the world, and so, you know, in my backyard, I see a few native birds, a few honey eaters, whereas in Angela's backyard, she sees zebras, and so I'm trying to get a sense of what people.
They're not in my backyard.
Like.
I actually have to drive out for that. They're not in my backyard. Unfortunately, all the game farms in South Africa are fenced in to keep the animals in and to keep the people out, because they're still getting poached for bushmeat, even zebras. So unfortunately, they're not in my backyard. I only get hawks.
They're closer to your backyard than they are to my backyard at the moment.
Okay. Melbourne Zoo has some couple of species.
I was about to think that was very interesting. Never heard of a zebra in the backyard before. But
so what are they? Yes.
Oh, I had a question for you. Basically about the research, the field notes. I was studying a brown anole, male brown anole, and it's in my backyard. There are a lot of them there, but it's more of a like a domestic environment, and so I wanted to really find a creative way in which I could actually keep track of that specific male to study, because I didn't want to start studying one and then I come the next day and I don't know if that's the same one I've been studying, because they all look alike. But I don't really know how to get the identifying markers or something like that. I think I've started studying one, but I lost him.
It's a perennial challenge. So with each study species, we have the challenge of trying to identify individuals. So I guess in your home environment, hi Mary, nice to have you back. I guess in the case of lizards, it depends on how tame they are, how close you can get to them. So you know, if you have the opportunity to try and I don't know, put a drop of paint on the back of one of the individuals, anything that will allow you to tell it apart from the others, or maybe they have markers that have individual characteristics that are sufficiently different for you to be able to recognize it, then that's one way of keeping track of an individual. So, yes, you know, I guess what we try and do is to have methods that allow us to identify individuals in a way that is not too invasive. So, at various times, people that have studied lizards have used techniques that were a little bit barbaric, that involve clipping off individual toes, etc. So that's not really allowable, and it's not ethically a great idea. So, but generally, things like marking individuals with a little dab of non-toxic paint or something else that allows you to recognize that individual are good, simple ways of trying to do that.
So we use little bee numbers for spiders. So the beekeepers manufacture these little numbers in different colors, and they mark their bee queens with it, and it's just a perfect size for spiders. A drop of, there's even special bee glue that's not toxic, and that works really well with spiders. And they come with their own little designed little numbers. And they don't seem to mind too much.
Marie, can I ask you, do you then focus on one individual, or do you go and, when you actually want to research a behavior, do you do one behavior at a time, I want to say, or do you just observe them in a group?
Yeah, so often my research comes about that I initially perhaps make an observation. Often it's really, I haven't planned it, I just observe something unplanned. So for example, my last project that I did, which is about aging, we just noticed that in the lab the spiders grow very, very old and they become quite senile. So it's a very casual observation, and it's often sort of an investigation about looking further into it in a more systematic way. So I've then talked about this with a few colleagues and I read some papers, and what was really needed, I think, for me to show that spiders are aging, and if you think about aging, it's a decline in performance. What I needed was individuals, quite a number of individuals. I needed to mark them individually so I could follow each individual over a number of time. And then I needed to release these individuals in a very similar environment, but they're all very close, so I'm not sending them into two different habitats. So in the end, I wouldn't know why they're behaving differently, whether it's different environment or because something about them individually. And so in that study, we marked 80 spiders, and we released them into the field, and then we visited them every week and measured an aspect of their performance. So for the spiders that I looked at, they build webs. So we measured the size of the web. We used an electric toothbrush to vibrate the web, and then we stop the time how quickly they attack the toothbrush, and they certainly always attract the toothbrush. And you can see that if you think about how humans age, as we grow older, we're just not as fast or performing as well. And with these 80 spiders, even though they were dying over the 3-4 months that we were watching it, the individuals, we had enough individuals that lived long enough for us to show that on an individual basis they were declining in performance, and because we had many individuals, we are quite confident that we are not observing just an odd outlier, but this is really a pattern that's in that population. So I think definitely you have to have many individuals that you are observing, mostly for your confidence that what you're observing is relevant for the entire population, and you haven't just by chance picked an aberration that's not really representative of what most spiders would be doing or most individuals would be doing.
Okay, as far as I understood, you are also studying about mating.
Yes.
Okay, and then what exactly are the studies?
Okay, so obviously some of the questions we're interested in is about sexual cannibalism, why the female is eating the male. We have recently discovered that males are very limited in their mating opportunities. So often we think about how males and females behave, is that males have lots of mating opportunities and they try to mate with many, many females, and females have limited mating opportunities. Maybe they only mate with a limited number of males. But in these spiders, it's exactly the opposite. Males
What's
are
the species?
Sorry?
What is the species? What is the species?
It's the St. Andrew's cross spider. The species is called Argiope, Argiope. There are lots of species across the globe, and they occur in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. They make a cross in the web, a white cross. Okay. You may have seen them like that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so we've recently discovered that the males are incredibly limited. They can only mate twice in their entire lifetime, and that is because they break off their genitalia when they mate. And males have paired genitalia, so 2 opportunities to transfer sperm. Every time they use, it's a modified leg that they have. So they have a modified leg that they fill with sperm to transfer to the female. And every time they use one of the modified legs, they break bits off, and then they can't use it again. So they're extremely limited. So they can mate twice, and sometimes they even just mate twice with the same female. So they, in their lifetime, they only mate with a single female, but maybe twice. So those are sort of questions around why do males only mate with so few females, whereas females can mate again. And it's very different to most mating systems where males are assumed to mate many, many times. And
Mariella, before you dropped out earlier on, we were talking about how things change when you originally become interested in animal behavior. You're fueled by the passion of the things that you see and what you want to do. And I suppose that as you become more and more successful, you become more senior and your role changes from being a day-to-day researcher who's always in the field or in the lab to a manager of people, in your case, manager of a whole department. I'm wondering how you manage to quarantine time that you can spend doing the research, the things that keep you passionate about your discipline.
Yeah, it's a real trade-off. It's a real trade-off. If you do all the research by yourself, it's very rewarding, but it's also very limiting by the time that you have. By taking on students, by having postdocs and research assistants, you can actually help them with their research, and you get exposed to many more different questions and systems. And so my students work on all sorts of things. They work on grasshoppers and beetles and bugs and praying mantids. I have then the opportunity to understand some of their biology, which I wouldn't have if I did all the research by myself. I wouldn't have that exposure. So I find it extremely rewarding. I think it's very important that everyone goes out into the field and has a look, just to remind ourselves what this is all about. So that's what I'm trying. I have a role as a head of department for 3 years, and that limits my opportunities to be out to do my own research a lot. But I get other rewards from, leading a department. That can be very rewardable as well. But I don't see myself for the rest of my life being an administrator. So I look forward to the end of my term as head of department, and then I look forward to being able to make more observations and design experiments and do them. But I mean, Raoul must have told you as well. I mean, that's the shift from a postdoc to a academic, where you start taking on students. You just do less yourself, and you enable others to do the research. In fact, everything is rewarding. There's never anything unrewarding, and the main thing, and I don't know how you deal with it, Raoul, is I think you have to go out once a season and just be out there and see things and be reminded again that this is what we're working for. I don't know, how often do you get out, Raoul?
I try to get out relatively regularly. It probably isn't once a week, but every couple of weeks. We're lucky in that we have a study site that's quite close to the university, really. Just a 30-minute drive. And once a month I try and spend a whole day in the field, just sensing and watching birds. And it's always painful because you think about all the other things you should be doing, but it's very rewarding and definitely not to be missed. It's interesting, we were talking with Elizabeth Tibet's last week, and she was saying how there's an interesting transition that happens. You go from being a consumer to a producer of information or research output.
So is it sometimes that you two just look at numbers and you actually forget what the animal, because I'd never seen so many mathematical modules to actually try and predict behavior, which actually quite surprised me. So is it that sometimes by crunching the numbers you just slightly go insane and you don't even know what actually animal behind it is?
No, actually I find the numbers also very rewarding. Trying to unlock what the numbers are showing, but but you're right. I think you have to have a good idea about what the behavior behind the numbers mean. And with the numbers, I think the important thing there is to be very patient with the numbers. I find often that the students that I work with, they go, well, this was the hypothesis and I'm testing it and it wasn't significant and it's all good for nothing and we may as well go home and you know, throw it all out the window. And often numbers have a lot of information that you have to really uncover. There's a lot of variation in between individuals, and then that's an interesting question where you go, okay, why did this subset of individuals behave this way and the other subset behaved another way? Were they bigger than the others, or were they hungrier than the others? And so you get to become very, very patient and sort of dig around the numbers. So and I'm actually very happy with numbers, but I'm also very confident that I understand what the numbers mean in terms of what the animals are actually doing out there. And I don't know, I suppose it can happen that people become too removed from seeing animals to just crunching numbers, and maybe that's not as creative as it can be. I don't know. Raoul, have you got anything to offer there?
I was going to say two things. One is that both of our research groups are not so large that it's easy to imagine that you could lose sight of what you were studying. So a typical research group for a researcher in animal behavior would be the leader of the group, somebody like Marie or myself, and then one or two postdoctoral fellows. So these are people that have finished a PhD, so they're established researchers that are setting out on their career. And then a group of PhD students that would be working on individual topics, and then probably also some master's students. So a typical research group would be in the order of 10, 15, 20 people all up. And so those relationships are quite intimate. It's hard to imagine that you wouldn't know, you would forget what one of your students was studying. But it is true that there are very successful people that have massive operations that might include 40 or 50 students or staff, where the role of the lead researcher really becomes about managing this factory of research. And there maybe people could lose a little bit of touch with the research. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say, I guess in terms of what the point Mariella was making about significant findings, non-significant findings, whether or not data are valuable or not, is that if the question is well designed, and we've talked through the course about what makes for a good question, if it's a good question, then it will give you useful information. You'll get some kind of answer about it. You may not find what you expected, maybe a little bit different to what you expected, but it will tell you something. You will learn something. And often we learn as much from what doesn't happen as we do from what does happen.
Yeah, that takes a long time to accept. I think when you start off, you just want a significant difference. And then, yeah, I think it takes a long time to become a bit more relaxed about that.
So has there been occasions that you actually did findings that were actually more interesting than the hypothesis that you thought you would be able to prove? I mean, Raoul or Marie?
Let me think about it. I can't think of anything immediately, but I wouldn't be surprised that I have a few experiences like that.
I think as a general trend, what we learn as we get older is that you start off with a very simple idea of how the world might work. Generally with quite simple ideas about why an animal might behave in a particular way. And sometimes you have counterintuitive findings, and they're perplexing and they're annoying and irritating and frustrating because they're not what you expected. But there are cases where you have to spend time then thinking more about those results, maybe following them up with other experiments, and you end up with a deeper understanding of what's going on and a more satisfying understanding and the realization that initially you were on the wrong track and you were oversimplifying what you thought was going on.
I have a question for Marie.
Go.
I was wondering, because I understand that with animal behavior, it has to be something that you're deeply passionate about, because not many people really have that kind of passion for animals or consider it something worthwhile studying for a lifetime. But I was wondering, because here in Jamaica, with the whole economic situation that we have here, where it's a little bit more difficult to earn and to live off what you earn, the financial and the economics part of it. It's out here. It's not that easy as to say just to have a passion for animals and just go after it. Because as much as it's a passionate field to be in, it's not very sustainable because it doesn't really pay well, right? And I'm not suggesting that it's just about the pay, but we have to. It has to be sustainable. If you agree with me, right? So I wanted to know, based on your or even Raul, you guys' experience in your personal experience in this field. Is it sustainable for you guys?
So,
how do you manage, with like your personal time and family times?
Okay, so that's sort of sustainable. So there's two sort of sustainables. One is the research sustainable in the sense of are governments, citizens willing to put money into research on animal behavior that may not have very direct economic payoffs? And I think we always have these sorts of discussions with funding bodies, and we want to convince funding bodies that blue sky research, such as working with animal behavior, doesn't have to have immediate payoffs, but can have very long-term, maybe even very subtle benefits for entire societies. So that's that kind of payoff, and it's a difficult argument to have, particularly when another research group is working on finding a cure for cancer, and where's the money going to go? Of course, it's going to go for the finding a cure for cancer, but nonetheless, I think this type of research has real value for society. Maybe not in terms of treating disease, but in terms of understanding the world around us. In terms of sort of the personal sustainability, balancing work and home life, I don't think it's unique to researchers, but maybe we're very bad at balancing it because we have such an unstructured work environment. We're very free with how we can allocate our time at work. There's only a few things we really have to do, and that's teach. And those are really the only fixed hours where we have to show up. Sober when, if possible, but it's an option. But the rest of the time it's entirely self-motivating, and I think that may mean that things are spilling over from work into family life, and particularly when you start off, I think you're very happy to cut into your family life and work hard on weekends and in the evenings. And maybe when you grow a little bit older and you go, oh, hang on, I also want to have a very balanced family life. I want to have weekends off. I think you sort of cut back. But maybe it goes together with having become a bit more successful and relaxed, that you're willing to not work so hard. I don't know. I'm saying this. It's 8 o'clock at night, and we're working. So maybe you shouldn't believe a word I'm saying. What about Raul? What's your take on this? Do you get balance?
I guess going back to the first question, it is something that we're often asked isn't it a little bit indulgent to be studying animal behavior? There are important conservation problems that need to be addressed. There aren't enough researchers in the world. Climate change is upon us. Shouldn't you be studying climate change, etc.? I think there are a few different answers to that question. I guess everybody has to do what they are good at. This is what we are good at. This is what we are able to provide good questions and answers for. And I agree with you. I think that it may not always be obvious what the immediate benefits are of understanding animal behavior, but often there are unexpected benefits. And I think especially in relation to conservation, it's very difficult to try and conserve wild animals without knowing very much about their behavior, and people have made big mistakes in terms of how they've tried to approach conservation problems without a foundation, a solid foundation of understanding of animal behavior. In terms of how people perceive animal behavior, I'm often struck by the fact that, in a way, what we do is a little bit more, in some ways, like the arts. The enjoyment that people get out of watching a natural history documentary, the warm, fuzzy feeling they get from seeing a David Attenborough documentary, the amazement that they feel when they see an animal do something just remarkable, is not that different to the pleasure you get from seeing a really fantastic piece of art. And so maybe we shouldn't be measuring it in terms of economic outcomes, but we should be thinking about it in the way that it enriches culture and enriches society, enriches people's lives through the pleasure and enjoyment they get out of understanding something, being amazed by something.
Okay, I get what you're saying, because I understand all of that. It's just that as much as it is like, you know, a piece of, it's similar to the feeling you'd get when you're looking at a very fantastic piece of art. It is also still a career option that many students are opt for. So, you know, we still usually have that question, because most of the times you realize that the business field is usually crowded, and not a lot of persons really want to, you know, go into environmental or animal science that much, because they think that it's, you know, something that you're going to be, you know, doing all this study and you're struggling to, you know, manage your life because it's not that sustainable financially. You're not able to provide for families and stuff. So it's just those two conflicting, you know, ideas. I usually struggle to find that one answer to those questions.
So a practical question from my side, though, is that, for example, Marie, you said that you were studying also the, was it the coloration with the St. Andrews cross spiders?
Yeah.
Now, how do you market that to potential fundraisers, like funders, sponsors?
Yeah. Very difficult.
Because usually I'm sure that sponsors actually want to get something out of it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is very difficult. There's no doubt about it, but I'm very upfront. I say this is a study that looks at the biology of an animal and looks at how this animal interacts with other animals through its color, and that's what I will find out. And it's based in theory, and I've got some great hypotheses and experiments, but that's what it will bring. It will bring more knowledge, it will bring research outputs, it will make a great story that the public is interested in, but no, it's not going to bring a patent, and it's not going to bring money. And look, not that governments are willing to pay a lot of money or allocate a lot of money for this type of research, but they do, because I think inherently they know that through lots and lots and lots of research such as this, we discover something, and that discovery may be entirely marketable and bring a lot of money. So, for example, if I'm interested in looking at color, I may discover a pigment in spiders that could be perfect for I don't know, lighting up cells to identify cancers. I'm back with cancer. Or in making a great color for fabric, something like that. So all of this is it's entirely feasible. I mean, the fluorescent pigments in marine organisms that's now used for fluorescent dyes in histology, for example, and that was just a by chance discovery. So you can never know what basic research will bring, but it is it's hard. I mean, and you're not always successful, and your grants are not always funded. Luckily, my research is very cheap. I think working with birds may be much more expensive and a bit more limiting.
I was going to ask Marie, what do you think about spiders as being an ideal model system to study your animal behaviour? Why do you think spiders are so good in that sense?
I think spiders are great because they are very diverse in their behaviour. They morphologically they're very similar. They have a very similar lifestyle. Many of them, they're all carnivorous. But there's distinct variation in many aspects of their biology, whether they are able to perceive the world with eyes or with their sense of vibratory information. So you can ask all sorts of questions, making use of these slight differences between different groups of spiders, but even within the genus you can get substantial variation. So I think they're really handy for answering a number of questions. You probably can make that argument for most organisms, but I think the important thing why you make that argument about spiders is because they've been assumed to be very invariant with their behavior. They're just like little robots. Therefore, their behavior is always the same, and therefore they're not suitable at all for behavioral research because you're not getting any variation. They're not behaving differently under different circumstances, which is what you want when you're interested in behavior. So I think the argument for spiders is that they are surprisingly flexible.
That sort of relates to another thing I read. That in your book, Spider Behavior, you were saying that a lot of people believe that most spider behavior, like web building and stuff, is innate, but that might not actually be the case. So I was wondering if you actually have any examples of like learned behavior, for example, in spiders.
Yeah, even web building behavior has a learned component to it. So when the little babies, the little spiderlings hatch, they often build a very perfect circular orb web, and it is really incredibly symmetric. But as they grow older, they start to modify this orb web, and that modification is based on the experience that they have. So you can do this experiment, you can do this at home as well. Spiders will change the shape of their web depending on where they're being fed in the web. So you can get them to enlarge the lower half of the web if you keep on feeding them in the lower half. So they learn, they realize this is where all the prey is getting caught. There's no point in investing silk elsewhere. I'm enlarging. So this is an experiment we did, and this is certainly something we can do an experiment as well. We just feed maybe on the left-hand side or the right-hand side, and so that's with a positive reward. You can also, spiders also learn negative stimuli. For example, someone breaking their webs on a regular basis, and so they actually shift the web away from the source of breaking. So again, they're learning that they need to shift the web out of this path where obviously something is walking through. And I think some of you may have made this observation anyway. You have a spider in the driveway and you keep on walking through it, and after a few times of that happening, the spider shifts the web up and you no longer break through it. So, and that's where the experience comes in, and that's how they change their behavior according to what they experience.
Ariella, I'm conscious that we've been chatting with you for about an hour now, so I think we should probably wrap up the discussion.
but I was offline for half of this.
I was wondering about whether or not I might ask you a more philosophical question as we finish up. And that is about how animal behavior, or the discipline of animal behavior, is changing. What sort of change have you noticed over the last 10 years or so, and what do you think will happen with animal behavior and the study of animal behavior over the next decade?
So in the last 10 years or so, I think animal behavior has a long time ago made the switch from just observational to experimental, and has actually been very strong in very good experimental design. So ecologists and behaviorists are really at the forefront of designing very, very good experiments with the right controls. And often there are other fields in, I mean, I don't want to be particularly critical, but often in physiology or even medicine, where controls and sample size are not really at the forefront of the thinking, and often it's quite lacking. There's not enough control. So that shift has happened a few decades ago, and I think animal behavior is really very good with designing very good experiments. More recently, I think people are embracing very big data. So there is ideas of meta-analyses, where we're making use of many studies, many small studies that have been published, and there's a wealth of information, and what we need now is to bring them all together to give us an idea of what's the general trend, and there are these meta-analyses that summarize all these the individual results of individual studies into big studies, and I think that's extremely powerful, especially if you think about how many papers are being published all the time, and it's really hard to keep on top of new stuff. What's going on?
Big data cuts across a lot of different disciplines. So there's a lot of technology now that's involved in animal behavior, where devices are recording things that animals do, and researchers are being faced with the challenge of not collecting the information, but interpreting this massive amount of information that comes from all this technology.
Yeah, and environmental data that come in that we just didn't have before, and that allows you really to untangle some of the environmental influences on specific behaviors. There's some great computer technology about following individual fish in a fish school and understanding how that individual's fish behavior is either influenced by its nearest neighbor or is influencing its nearest neighbor. So there's some great stuff out there that's looking into very fine mechanisms of behavior on the one hand, and then the big data on the other hand. It's really exciting time, actually.
And if you had one piece of advice that you'd give to a student setting out, wanting to start a career in animal behavior research, what would it be?
Do what you're good at, you know. Keep on, if you love it, if you're good at it, keep on going. Otherwise, we may as well all become accountants. There's, you know, when you're good at it, when you have conviction, you will get an opportunity. You know, I'm not a genius at all when it comes to science. I was a very mediocre undergraduate student, but I really love this, and I'm very patient, and I was patiently waiting for opportunities, and I took them when they came along. And I stuck with it, and I think that makes you successful. Just sticking with it. You don't have.
But I would like to know what kind of skills a good researcher of animal behavior should have. It means if you are going to decide to have a PhD student, what kind of skills are you looking for?
I think having good logic helps. I mean, being able to make very logical arguments. Creativity is very important because the design of experiments is a very creative act. Enthusiasm and patience, absolutely patience. You have to be so patient, whether it's observing things or trying things or trialing things. I think these are really the basic skills that you need.
You don't have to be a whiz at math.
I'm not. No, I'm just persistent.
An important role in. Okay.
Sorry.
I was asking, statistics play an important role in conducting these studies. I mean, analyzing these studies. So you definitely have to be good at. One definitely has to be good at statistics, right?
It certainly helps, but you can always get a collaborator who is a statistics gun. Yeah, you can. I mean, this is not the end of it if you're not very good at statistics. Yeah, but it certainly helps if you're not afraid of numbers. But you know, the analysis of the numbers is also something that someone else could do much better than you, and then you should have that collaboration. But the question you have to come up with these questions and the way of trying to answer the questions. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't do the various statistic courses. They're very helpful.
But isn't it one of the important prerequisites that scientists look for when they're selecting a student for, in their lab?
I don't ask that question. I think I'm more interested in whether they're interested and enthusiastic and patient. Statistics, we can learn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, on that encouraging note, Mariella, I think we're going to wrap up the Hangout. And thank you very much for giving your time. Probably still haven't had dinner. We're holding you up from that. So,
good. Sorry it didn't work at the beginning.
No. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been really interesting having a chat with you. And all the best for your research. And we might meet up with you again in a future research meet.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mariella.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Bye.